Welcome everyone. This is Karol with Kentico. Thank you for joining me today. We have another month gone by, and so once again it's time for our regular monthly webinar. Today I would like to talk to you a little bit more about one of Kentico features, and specifically the web analytics. And so with we always try to focus with these webinars on topics that currently resonate among our partners. And as we've seen during past couple of months, there was some buzz around Kentico Web Analytics recently, and maybe one of the reasons why was because just recently we introduced a new analytics logging mechanism. And I was talking to clients and partners, and I realized that even though the web analytics is available in Kentico for years now, basically from what I remember from version 2 point something, there are still questions and unknown around how this module actually operates, how logs are stored and processed in the system, and how you can control processing of web analytics tracking. So with all that, I decided that I will share with you some details that you cannot exactly find in documentation or just like that on public forums. And so the goal for today is therefore few things. First of all, I would like to explain how web analytics actually tracks the data, so where the tracking is happening, and I would like to talk about some advanced configuration options. Two, I would like to explain what is improved tracking mechanism about and how it compares to regular analytics tracking that we been having so far, and why we need an alternative in the first place. And then I also want to look at the core analytics API and pinpoint some important classes that you can leverage when managing analytics from the code. And the last thing, but not least, obviously, how you can add your custom logging using the new tracking method available. So we want to exactly look at the stuff that might be obvious, then the stuff that basic stuff that you can look up in the developer's guide and that you can figure out more or less yourself. But I want to take a look a step further, and I want to talk about things that aren't that obvious. So it's a lot to cover. So let's kick off this session talking about analytics tracking flow in general. Okay, and as always, feel free to submit your questions during the presentation. We'll definitely have time to take a look on questions at the end, or if I figure out that the question actually makes sense to us right away, we will take a look on those as we go. So if you have any issue seeing my screen, please let me know before I get too further. But right now, on the screen in front of you, you can see simplified scheme of analytics process from the moment when user hits the website till the moment when collected data is presented to the administrator. When I say administrator, that's obviously the person that is looking at the statistics within Kentico. So it all starts with some kind of event occurring on the site, right? It can be pretty much anything. It might be a page view, user visit, it might be submitting some online form, performing search on site, or landing on the site after external search, searching in one of the search engines. Web Analytics is responsible for tracking all events happening on the site, so including events that fall under the online marketing category. So whether it's online marketing activities that you're tracking, or whether it's more related to page views and visitor status and that kind of stuff, it's still the same web analytics module. During the lifetime of the request, application goes through the several stages, obviously. For example, when the request is mapped to the proper handler, the map request handler event is fired in the system, and Kentico is responding, raising the CMS map request handler. Those are, I'm talking about the handlers. The handlers I'm talking about are in the green box in the scheme in front of you. So when the CMS map request handler is executed, at that moment, analytics tracks conversions, campaigns, page not found events if the request results in 404 error, and so on. After that initial stage is over, the request state is acquired, and CMS acquire request state handler takes over, and it's logging information about the user's landing page, referring sites, what is the status, returning visitor status of the current user, and other user-specific information. Before the request processing is finished completely, the page view is analyzed and logged in the CMS end request event handler. So that's the last one that I'm mentioning in that the green box. Obviously, there is a bunch of others events that I'm not mentioning. I just want you to realize that through the system there are various stages, and in each stage Web Analytics may log a different set of statistics. So whether a specific statistic gets logged or not, that depends on the actual configuration of analytics module, obviously. You can pick and choose what statistic to track from the site manager. When you go to settings under the online marketing category, there is web analytics area where you manage all your web analytics settings, so you can select what you want to track in there, and based on that the system will decide whether the event is trackable or not. So when the log is created in the system, so now we are moving to step 4. When the log is created in the system, it gets stored either in temporary virtual storage, which is called memory storage, or it is stored in the physical location along with the other logs. This is a step that not many clients know about. So the fact whether it's going to be one or another depends on the settings specified for the Web Analytics module. By default, though, all logs are stored in the memory first, where they stay for approximately 60 seconds before they are transferred to physical storage and get stored as a physical log files. These log files have specific formats that Kentico defined, and all statistics logged through the Kentico Web Analytics API will follow the same format. Now, if you don't change default configuration and logs are therefore stored in the memory first, the way the system operates, the system handles that is that system creates at that point a dummy item in a cache. That's what I'm trying to visualize over here. So there is dummy cache item stored in the cache, and the expiration time for that dummy item is set to current time plus 1 minute. So that way, for duration of 1 minute, all statistics that resides in a memory, or for the duration of 1 minute, all statistics resides in a memory until the dummy item expires. And at that point, statistics get transferred from memory into the physical location. And I, on purpose, referring to that storage as a physical location. I'm not saying a specific location because, as you will see later, you can actually define where the physical log files will be stored at the end of the day. But by default, that location is within the APP data, CMS modules folder, and then in the CMS module folder there is Web Analytics folder, and each statistic that you're tracking is stored in separate log file. Just FYI, then for names of log files, we use a special format that incorporate code name of the statistics, date and time when the statistic was collected, and then optionally a name of the machine where these statistics were collected. So in case that I have multiple instances pointing to the same storage, I have that additional information in the name of the log file, so I know exactly where these statistics are coming from. Log storage is updated with the latest data collected every so often, by default every minute. When the system processes log files, storing statistics data in database. So once the data are in the database, a respective log file is deleted from the storage. How often are logs processed and moved to the database, that depends on the configuration of global system schedule task called process analytics log. That's probably, you are probably familiar with that if you've been configuring and working with web analytics so far. By default, this task gets executed every minute. So if task doesn't run, analytics logs are generated, but the data are not moved to the database, and thus no web analytics reports available in the system are really updated, right? So I'm just collecting the data, but I don't see any updates within the system. So we therefore need to ensure task is executing properly to get valid statistical data. I know that might seem obvious, but you would be surprised how many people are actually, having issues with the web analytics data, and they're still not able to figure out that, what is the issue? Is it about creating those logs, or is it about processing those logs? So it's nothing easier than just go and check whether the schedule task is running, whether the log files are created in the location, in the physical storage, right? So that data stored in the database are then presented as web analytics reports. That's done using the Kentico reporting module. While Kentico comes with tens of reports on analytics data out of box, you can still write your own select statement, basically, that goes through the collected data that were stored in the database, and you can provide an additional view on what's happening on your site. Last thing I want to add before we move forward from this slide is that in the given example, I mentioned that physical log files were stored in the web server's file system. Actually, they were stored directly in the project folder. That app_data CMS modules, that's obviously folder within the website project. That's, however, just one of the possible options, right? Thanks to the customization model that we have, you can define your own storage provider, and that's touching a different part of the system. But you can create your custom storage provider. When you're creating storage provider, you basically say that this storage provider takes care of all the files that are stored, or that system tries to store in a specific location in the file system, as well as a whole different storage, right? So you map your storage provider to the path, and that way you can store the log files on a shared network drive. You can store them in the cloud storage like Azure Blob or Amazon S3 or any other storage provider, simply because you can easily create your own provider class associated with analytics module, and the system will automatically store data in there. So we will actually look on remapping analytics storage to something custom a little bit later, so I'll get back to it. Anyways, let's take a look on what are some advanced settings you can use to change the way the tracking process works, the tracking process as I outline it right now. So web analytics can be configured on two levels, right? In the site manager, as any other module, using standard web analytics settings, or through the web config, using special application settings. One of the things that web analytics keeps track of is visitor status of current user. So the user can be first-time visitor or returning visitor. System is out of gates using cookies and session to track visitor status. However, you probably thinking what's going to happen if user disables cookies or session get lost, right? To prevent situation when user's status cannot be determined based on cookie or session information, you can instruct system to remember visitors based on their IP address. All you have to do is just enable remember visitor by IP, and by setting number of minutes to something greater than 0, the IP will be used as a primary identifier of returning visitor. After a specified number of minutes expires, the visitor will no longer be considered as a returning visitor. Related setting to that is visitor idle time, which allows you to define how long inactive user needs to be before how long the user needs to be inactive before system switch their status to returning visitor. Depending on business needs, you may also need to filter certain requests from analytics processing, maybe because I don't know, you don't want to search engine generated traffic to be counted in statistics, or maybe you are target of malicious bots, and you want to exclude a certain IPs from tracking. Whatever else the case might be, you can control that excluded traffic through the set of exclude settings available in the site manager as well, as you can see on this slide. These are all settings that are more or less familiar to most of you. When it comes to the web config settings having impact on web analytics, the situation tends to be a little bit different there. I was talking about possibility to track visitor status using IP address earlier, right? So I mentioned that when specified time expires, system removes tracked IP from the memory, and next time visitor with the same IP hits the website, they will be logged as a new unique visitor. So the unique visit statistics is influenced by that. If you want to ensure that for as long as user is active on the site, their IP is kept in memory no matter how long it has been since it was added to the collection, you can use sliding expiration. So that way, that's the CMS Web Analytics sliding IP expiration key that you can use. And that way, every time user interacts with website, expiration period for their IP address will be extended by 1 minute. So as long as the user is active, that expiration period won't run out of time, right? So earlier I also mentioned that by default, system uses kind of mid-tier for storing track data before they are added to the physical storage. That memory storage option can be actually disabled and enabled using CMS Web Analytics use memory storage web config key. And the reason why you want to keep memory storage active is to eliminate frequency in which system writes new data to the physical log files, write new data to the file system, or if you are using some kind of external storage provider, let's say the Azure that I mentioned, or Azure or Amazon S3, those operations, the write operations for those storages may be actually slower. They typically are slower than accessing the file system, right? So even then, it's even more important that you use that memory storage, because that should result in better performance using the memory storage with the web analytics. Although one of the downsides is that if there should be an issue with application and application recycle is involved, you basically losing all analytics data that are stored in the memory since the last write. So it is trade-off as pretty much everything. You just need to be aware of that and then make informed decision on that piece. So that should take care of that. Now I would like to switch gears and let's take a look on an issue with the standard tracking mechanism and what can be done to eliminate it. Okay, so for that I have this awesome slide here. We've been hearing for some time now same story. At least I've been listening to the same story over and over again. So you have a website live, web analytics is enabled, your statistics get filled with a lot of data, but for some reason, you're looking at the data and you're just thinking that something is not right? Because you have tons of views, but no leads, or you see a lot of activities, but no underlying metrics that would somehow measure or support volume of hits you are seeing in the reports. And then you get it. Your site is basically flooded with traffic that is generated by all kinds of non-human entities like crawlers or malicious bots, or traffic generated by various areas, RSS readers and such, right? So you realize that what you really need is to filter out traffic that comes from these unimportant bodies, and you want to focus on real human traffic instead, right? So how do you do that? Well, the way you do that is by introducing an extra layer, which is like an additional filter to the analytics tracking process, right? And that's where we're getting to the next slide, and when we're getting to the web analytics via JavaScript. So one way of doing that implementing that additional filter and approach that Kentico has taken is to move logging of certain events from server side to client side. So more precisely, I'm talking to the client side JavaScript. So since JavaScript will be executed only when request is made from regular browser session, those fake humans, as I call them, won't trigger logging simply because JavaScript won't get executed when the request is made outside regular browser session, right? Or at least that's assumption. So you are looking at a scheme here outlining solution that was added to the system from version 7.0.17, I believe. That's actually the hotfix number 17, that once you apply that hotfix, you will get access to this functionality. So it was added as part of one of the hotfixes because, as I said, we've been getting the same feedback over and over. So development obviously decided that it's change that is easy enough, and it will bring a better functionality, better behavior to the clients. So they implemented in hotfix 17. When you apply that hotfix, you will get the JavaScript logging, and here you can see that whenever on the schema you can see that whenever the live page is requested, that's that first step, the system injects some JavaScript code snippet to the response, and it sends it along with the page to the client. That JavaScript code gets executed on the client side, assuming that the page is displayed in the browser, and it causes an asynchronous callback back to the server, and that call is made for analytics web service that is sitting and running on the server side. So call carries information about event that occurred, some related statistics data, and then the actual hit log. So event log is created on the server side in that web service that is called from the JavaScript. I believe it's a simple idea, but it serves the purpose pretty well. So that way, the only requests that invoke callback will be considered human sourced and therefore stored in a database and eventually, in statistics. So with that, let's move a little further. Let's take a look on the solution focusing on actual implementation, right? So how it is actually implemented. If you look into the API, Kentico API, in the CMS UI controls, what you will find in the CMS UI control namespace, you will find a class called document base. The document base class is used by a couple other classes that are inheriting from, they are not inheriting, sorry. They are actually creating an instance of that class internally, and then they are calling methods from the document base. So I'm specifically talking about two classes, content page and template master page. Those two, they create instance of document base and call the methods from the document base. The thing is that these two classes are used as a base class for standard page classes like get file page or content page, which is essentially the class that is inherited by portal template.aspx page. And if you are familiar with the way how the portal engine works, you know that that's pretty much the only physical page that every request for portal engine based page is rewritten to. Or I mentioned the template master page, and that's on the other side the class that you inherit from whenever you are creating an ASPX template master page. So that way you basically or the system is gaining access to the document base. And why the document base is important is because document base implements init async analytics method. That method is called on page load, and assuming that the JavaScript logging is enabled, and that's something that you control through the site manager, online marketing, and web analytics section, after you apply hotfix 7.0.17, you will have an option to enable that JavaScript logging. Assuming that that's enabled, this method, the init async analytics method, will inject JavaScript callback code to that page, right? So this way, no matter where the request occurs, if JavaScript logging is enabled, asynchronous client-side logging will replace a server-side logging, because the pages that are inheriting from a portal page-based class or template master page-based class, they will be calling the methods from the document base automatically. So, of course, client-side makes sense to use only for certain events, specifically those that are not the result of user interaction with elements on the page. If you are displaying, let's say, subscription form on the site, and you still want to do logging server side, because after you validate the input was valid, and that if you are using out-of-box form engine is happening on the server side. And so what you want to do is you don't want to log such event when subscription is displayed only. You want to wait until it's validated on the server side and then perform the logging, right? So that's example when JavaScript logging doesn't make sense. You still want to log those on the server side. You are also advised to take advantage of JavaScript logging when tracking your custom activities. And I prepared actually a sample of such implementation, and I will show you that in a minute. But before, I know that many of you are wondering what is the trade-off here, right? What are you sacrificing when you decide to switch from JavaScript to JavaScript logging from server-side logging? So the thing is that when you're using a JavaScript logging, there is one more request involved in logging, right? Simply because instead of logging even as soon as request is made to the server, so when the page is loaded, I request the home page, the request goes for the home page, it hits Kentico, Kentico finds that page, sends the response back to the client, and at that time the event is not logged yet. So the page view event is not logged right away, but instead what I'm doing is I'm adding a JavaScript code, and I'm expecting a returning callback that invokes actual logging. So there is that one more request added to the processing. Some may worry about impact of such change on performance, right? Especially if we consider high traffic websites. Based on our load tests, based on my discussion with the technical team, they didn't identify any significant slowdown with this approach. So when you think about it, it makes actually sense, because that callback is just asynchronous JSON call, meaning that the amount of data transferred back to the server is minimal, as well as the whole processing of such a request is avoiding the whole URL rewriting routine, right? Since such service calls should be actually excluded from URL rewriting completely. It's a physical web service that doesn't need to be rewritten using a Kentico. Kentico doesn't need to look into content tree and do all the bunch of stuff that is happening for the regular content. So what I want to do at this point is to show you, I got ahead. I want to show you in the code, first of all, a document base that I'm talking about, because obviously the document base is coming from this UI controls assembly, so you don't have access to it if you don't have a source code, or you shouldn't have. If you've got it, good for you. But anyways, here some document base. Yeah. So I want to show you that insert init async web analytics code. You can see that this is the method that after a series of checks, one of them, as I said, whether the JavaScript logging is enabled. Notice that it's coming from the analytics helper. So assuming that you're going to implement the JavaScript logging yourself somewhere, you will need to check whether the JavaScript logging is enabled, and you will do that the same way. Okay, so that's the first thing. But then after the system identifies that, okay, I'm good to use the JavaScript, then this insert web analytics JS method is called, and if you look at it, it's fairly simple. There is nothing complicated here. Script helper has a register web service call function. All it does is really registering just a reference to JavaScript file that contains definition for this web service call function. The JavaScript file can be found in CMS scripts folder. So over here under the CMS scripts there is a web service call JS, and if you take a look inside, you will see that all this web service call function does, it performs an asynchronous request, XML request. It's either XML HTTP request or ActiveX object based on the family of the browser that it's coming from. The bottom line is that it's asynchronous post request to URL that defines where that callback service is located on the Kentico site and what method from that service should be called, right? So that's why when I go back to the document base, I can see that the script that is generated in the document base is calling web service call, is pointing to that Kentico callback web service, which is located in CMS pages, and it's web analytics service.asmx. Okay, so you can see since it's in the CMS pages, you actually have access to it, so you can modify the code of that service if you need to do so. And then, we are passing the name of the method from that web service that should be executed with that callback, and we are passing a parameter. So what is the current page, and what is the URL referrer for the current request. So this guy here, this script snippet is then registered using script helper register startup script. So when the page is loaded and the DOM object is loaded, that script is executed and the callback is fired back to the server right away. Actually, if you take a look in the on this request in Fiddler, you will see that it's really just a minimal JSON request that is happening here. And so this is document base, but I was talking about how, for example, a portal template page is leveraging document base. So once again, the portal template.aspx, for those of you that are not familiar with this page, it's stored in the CMS pages folder, and it's really the only physical ASPX page that exists in the file system that relates to portal engine pages. So when you're creating the pages in the content tree and you base them on the portal engine template, right, and then someone requests the page that is just a virtual page in the content tree, doesn't exist in the file system, the URL rewriting engine at the very last stage will eventually rewrite the requested URL to this page. So it will be rewritten to something like www.domain.com/cmspages/portal-template-aspx, and then in the query string there will be information about the alias path of the page that is requested, and then optionally some other information that the portal template ASPX page will use to render the portal engine page. So that's why when we want to make sure that a JavaScript snippet is inserted to every portal engine page that may be created in the system, the portal template is ideal place where to insert that, right? So when I'm looking at the code behind of the portal template in a portal page, I can see that the portal template is inheriting from the portal page. Should I go deeper and take a look on definition of the portal page, now you will see that I'm getting to the content page that I was talking about. And the content page internally has a document base instance. So it's working with the document base instance. And actually, if you go back to the portal template ASPX in the on-pre-render, which is pretty much the only code behind that you will see out of the gates here, you can see that in on-pre-render we are accessing a header text property, and then whatever is the content of that header text property is set to literal, that is in a portal template design file in the header, and that's the way how we are passing the additional header content to this portal template page that will render the final page HTML, right? But the important thing is that when you take a look on definition of the header text property that is coming from the portal page, in order to get header text, it's executing document-base.getHeaderText method. And when you take a look inside that method, you will see that here, this is the place where our init async web analytics method is called, right? So at this point, system will actually check, is JavaScript logging enabled? If so, bam, include the code snippet in the header. Okay, so we are slowly approaching the time here, so let's quickly take a look now on Web Analytics API before I get to the final part where I will show you how to implement a custom logging using client-side JavaScript. Okay, so Web Analytics API, when it comes to it, let me switch back to the presentation really quick. And by the way, I don't know if I mentioned that, but here you can see a list of events that can be tracked as of today using the JavaScript. So when you switch that logging mechanism from server-side to client-side JavaScript, these are the events that will take advantage of it. So as I said, not everything makes sense to be tracked by JavaScript, and these are the things that are actually tracked. So, but regarding the API, you really need to get familiar with the following three classes, I believe. And after that, you should be able to achieve any analytics-related task very easily. So perhaps the most important class of all would be HitLog Provider from CMS Web Analytics namespace. That's the first one that I'm talking about, because it allows you to change a default value of log directory property, which is actually property that defines path of the physical log storage. So when I was talking about the option to change the path for the log files, instead of app data, I want to use some external storage, or maybe some shared network storage, or maybe just some other directory on the web server, I can do that by changing log directory. This is a static property from the hid log provider, so when I change it once on the application start, the same value will be used for the remainder of the lifetime of the application until it recycles. But then again, since I'm setting it in the on application start, it will be set to the same thing over and over again, even when the application restarts, right? So it's easy as that. I just change the log directory value to something custom, and that's where the system will try to store a physical log files. So another reason is that this class implements log hid method. That's the second bullet point over there. And the log hid method is ultimately called to log every single event that Web Analytics tracks. So whether it's activity related, so the online marketing activity, or whether it's page view related or visitor related, it always narrows down to the same log hid method call. You provide information about statistic that you want to add hid for, and when I say hid, is basically to add another entry into the log file related to specific statistic. You provide information about what site and culture that hid relates to. Obviously, only if the nature of the event you're tracking requires that. Then what object it is related to, and this method will take care of everything. It will create a log in the memory if that's used, and then eventually a log in the physical storage. The log hid method is actually checking internally whether the physical storage is the default one or whether you are using a custom one. And in case that it's custom, then it will append that machine name into the name of the log file. So here what I'm trying to explain is that this part is optional, and that underscore machine name is added only if it's external storage. Okay, so so that's the log hid. You can look at it as some kind of absolute abstraction of all the logic that is behind Web Analytics, and it's used to simply log an event in a very easy way. So the one example of all, and I'm sure that if you are working with the Web Analytics at this point, you already did that. But for those of you that haven't actually seen how such call would actually look like, here I have ugly inline script, inline C# script that is actually calling the hid log provider log hid, and you can see that all I'm doing here is providing the name of the statistics that I want to track, and this can be whatever you want. It is just like an identifier of the statistic that you are collecting. So then when you are building your report to display the data, you are using this code name, it's called a statistic code name, to filter out only statistics that are important for you, for that report. So you will use that to identify a type of statistic. Then I'm providing current site and document culture, obviously. Then this guy here allows me to bundle in the log that will be stored in the database with some custom data. So you can see that I'm using a macro expression, or at least the format is a macro expression. It's here on purpose. I put it here because I want to emphasize that even if you provide a macro expression here, it won't be evaluated. It will be stored as is. So it will be actually encoded so it's not resolved, and then it will be stored in database. So if you want to have some kind of dynamic value stored at this place, you actually need to do that before you assign it to the value. This parameter is called object value. And the last one that I'm providing is object ID. So what is the ID of a related Kentico object that is associated with this statistic? And this will ultimately log a one hit for a given statistic. So every time this is executed, a count of hits for test Karol J statistic will be incremented. And you can actually, if you start looking at that API, you can see that there are several overrides of this method. The one allows me to specify a value on top of that, another a count, or both count and value at the same time. And what you can do with those is you can kind of manipulate with the statistics. So you can say how many hits should be added to the statistic by running this log hit method. And the value is actually something that you can use to add an importance to the hit that was just performed. So you can say that if the log is performed by user that is not VIP, the value is just 0 or 1 or 100 or something, and then if it's performed by someone VIP, then you will double or triple the value of the hit. And then you can actually see, you can then compare those different hits and different values, and that will create your statistic ultimately, right? So let's get back here. Another commonly referenced class in web analytics is hit log processor. That's the second one. Importance of this class is in fact that this is implementation of actual schedule task that runs in configured intervals and process physical log files from physical storage, and it moves it to the database. So it's accessing log files in the path that is specified by hitlogprovider.log directory, right? Then it retrieves a list of all log files from the given location. It will extract information about date and time from the file name. And assuming that the date and time is in the past, it will process data stored inside the log file. This is an important piece of information because I've seen the clients that would be either moving server from one time zone to another, or for I don't know for what reason, honestly, but the time zone had changed for them, and suddenly their web analytics stopped working, or it didn't stop working, and new events were working properly, but there was a bunch of old analytics logs that were never processed. And the reason was because they moved, or the time zone moved, shifted, so the date and time of those files were actually in the future, not in the past. So the process analytics task didn't really process them at all. So assuming that the date and time is in the past, then the schedule task will process the files, and the way of files are actually processed is that the statistics from every file are added to the virtual collection. Okay, that's a hash table where all the hits for the same statistics are added together. So if I'm going through the log files and I have a bunch of files that all track test Karol J statistic, I will go through all of them first, and then using the key and the format of the key, you can see in here site name, semicolon, culture, and so on, right? Using that key, I will see if there was already the same statistic processed before. If so, I will add the values in there, and then I will store it in a database. The thing is that when it's actually storing the files, logs in a database, it goes through the batches of 10. So I will get 10 statistics, bam, store it in the database. Get another 10, again, go to the database, and so on. So it's, again, for the performance reasons, so we don't go to the database too often. Okay, so that's that. And the last Web Analytics API class I would like to point out is Analytics Helper. And this one you don't use for logging of custom statistics, but it provides more methods that allow you to check whether analytics is enabled, whether the tracking of specific event is enabled, and so on, right? And it also provides an additional logging methods that cannot be found in the HitLog provider, because those methods like log referring site, log search keywords, and others, those are internally calling log hit. So those are just built on top of the log hit method, and they are adding some additional checks before the system actually log a hit related to search, or when the referral is made, when the landing page is logged, and stuff like that, right? So that's what is found in Analytics Helper. But as I said, you will probably don't use those, but it's definitely useful when you need to evaluate your option. Okay, so that's about that. And the last thing, looking at the time, well, actually, sorry about that, I forgot about this one. So this one I included here because there is, I don't know for what reason, but there is typically confusion about how the system actually log a visitor. And when I say log visitor, I actually mean few things: how the user visitor status, so returning versus first time visitor is tracked, but also as part of the same log visitor method, the system keep track of browser type, you know, what country user comes from, what mobile device they are using, and so on. And as I explained earlier, the way it works is that the system will first try to use IP address to identify a returning visitor, just because the IP address would be, we can control whether the IP address collection exists or not, right? With the session or cookie, if they remove cookies, clean up the cookies, the session is gone, or the cookie is gone. So it would be more difficult to figure out the status. So the first that the system tries to check is based on the IP address. Do I know that user or not? If I don't know the user, you know, then I take a look on the session, and then eventually I take a look on cookie, and I will try to figure it out from there. So that's the priority kind of thing. Just to clarify what goes first. Okay, so that's that. And the last thing I want to do is to show you an example of how you can create your custom, how you can implement your custom event logging using a new JavaScript tracking functionality. So what I've done, and not thank you yet, don't go. What I've done here is, so what I was trying to do, right? I was trying to emulate a logging, or I wanted to introduce a statistic that would keep track of landing page and the searched keyword pair. So if I'm in the Google and I search for some term and my Kentico website pops up in the results, and I click, and the user clicks on the link that Google provides, you know, pointing back to my website, I want to know what keywords were leading to what results and what landing pages eventually, right? So I can then focus on optimizing those pages that the search engines provides as a landing pages for the most of the time. So yes, there is a statistic that keeps track of landing pages. There is a statistic that keeps track of referral sites, but I want to have something that contains that information together, you know, glued together, so I can then build a report that will tell me exactly that, okay, the 51% of your users, they're coming to the home page when they search such and such keyword, right? That's what I wanted to do. So what I come up with is a custom web part that is including JavaScript snippet on the page where it's placed, and causing the callback back to server to my custom web analytics service, and that custom web analytics service then performs heat log using a regular heat log provider log heat method. And two things. The reason why I decided to use the custom web part, and the reason why I decided to use a custom web analytics service in both cases is because, yes, I know I could come here in the portal template and adding that code snippet in here. I know that, but as well as with custom web analytics service, I want to avoid modifying a default system files, right? Because the idea is if I need to do customization, I want to do it in such a way that when it comes to the hotfix or upgrade, I don't have to do any additional steps. I don't have to merge any custom code, anything like that. So that's why I decided that I will create a web part. It's a custom web part, and I don't have to worry about the upgrades and hotfixes, and I will drop it on master page, and it works the same way as if I would place it to the portal template, right? Plus, I've got the option to do the deployment, the flexible deployment, because I'm deploying just a piece of the system. I don't need to take a portal template with me, which wouldn't be possible through the content staging or import-export anyways. So the web part is great because it's easy to deploy, and the custom web service, when I create that custom web service, I will place it in the global folder in the app code. So when the site is exported and the export global folders option is checked in the export wizard, then that web service code file will include it as well. So with that, I will close these guys here. So we make a room, okay, and over here I have few things, right? I have a CMS web parts, obviously. In here I've got a custom folder, and in the custom folder I got this log keywords landing page.ascx control, and here I'm thinking, yeah, and here, and don't please disregard this one, I will remove it so it doesn't confuse you. And then besides the web part, I also have a folder called log keywords landing page underscore files. You probably know that the reason why it's called like this is because if I call the folder sitting next to the web part code files like that, which is essentially the code name of the web part that I used when I registered this control as a web part in the system, and I add underscore files at the end of the folder name. That way, every time the web part is exported, content of this folder is exported along with the web part. So this way, I'm bundling the web part code files with some supporting files. Okay, so I don't have to do then a manual, additional manual deployment of some third party, some additional files. So that's here. If you take a look on that web part, actually, nothing complex here. The only thing I have here is the tracking enabled property, where I'm checking a bunch of things, whether it's postback, if the logging is enabled, whether the JavaScript logging is enabled, because obviously this web part, the whole purpose is to use the JavaScript logging. So if it's disabled, this whole thing, tracking enabled, will be false basically. And because my web part is specifically focusing on search keywords and page views, I'm also checking, you can see that that's when I use the analytics helper right there, checking whether the tracking of those is enabled. If that's all enabled, assuming that is all passed, the tracking enabled is true, then you can see that on content loaded, if stop processing is not set to true. So if the portal manager give me a green to go and proceed with the web part logic, then I'm calling setup controls method, and in here I'm creating a few variables, so the search keywords that I will use to get keywords that were searched, and a referrer object that is the URL referrer that analytics helper helps me access. These guys shouldn't be here, obviously. This is just because, well, it was kind of tricky for me to get Google index my localhost website. So this is just that, faking the referrer and then faking some keywords. That's all it is. But over here, you can see that I'm calling a search engine info provider, get search engine name for URL. And what it is, this is a method that is here because you are probably aware of the fact that in the development, I can specify a list of search engines. So what are the domains associated with search engine? So domain about.com is about search engine, and so on, right? So the search engine info provider get search engine name for URL. When I pass the URL, which is that referrer, right? It will take a look on domain. It will try to match it with the list of search engines. If it finds some, it will return the name of the search engine. Plus, you can see that I'm using the reference to search keywords and I'm passing that in. So internally, the system will extract keywords from that absolute URI property, which is the URL of the referrer search engine URL. It will extract that search keywords from the URL and provide those through the search keywords property. So if it is search engine, then I'm inserting my custom analytics JavaScript. And here I'm doing the same thing you've seen with the document base. I get the service URL. This is where it is stored in my example. Then I'm calling the same web service call function. See, so I'm using a default web service call .jas function or the script to call the default web service call function. I'm just supplying a different set of parameters. So a different service URL, different statistic code name, and different parameters. So search keywords, culture, document ID in my case, right? And then I just register it using the same script helper register startup script. This way, the web part renders this code. The callback is triggered back to the server. And so when I take a look on implementation of that custom web analytics service, you can see it's over here, but the code behind is obviously stored in the app code. As I said, I stored it in the global folder, and it has just one script method called log keywords landing page, and I just processing the data basically and then calling a hit log provider with my custom statistics name, and that's it. That way I'm logging my custom events using the JavaScript logging. The one thing to remember, and because you most likely will use the existing web analytics service as a base for your custom one, you need to make sure that this method is actually a script method, not just a web method, because if you would generate the default, if you would create a web service based on the default template that Visual Studio has, it will only create this method as a web method. You would get exceptions when you trigger that callback when you trigger that callback back to the server. If the script method is not set, then you would get exception saying that I believe that only script methods are allowed or something like that. I don't recall exactly, but I know that I had to do some adjustments here. Okay, so that's pretty much all from me for today. We now have time, obviously, for your questions. So please go ahead and let me know if you want to ask anything. It may not be directly related to what we covered today, but maybe you have some other question around web analytics. So whatever it is, go ahead. Floor is yours, and I will wait for a couple of minutes. And yeah, if there are any questions, let's take a look on that. Okay, so I've got one question here. Well, those are two questions actually. So the question is, as far as I know, IMS gives you the chance of seeing all the keywords from external searches. In the case of Google Analytics, many come from not provided. My question is how we can split the traffic into pay-per-click and organic. My second question would be how it is possible to set a goal in IMS, let's say an URL goal. So that's a good question. The first one, unless you are able to really to divide or identify what lead is coming through the pay-per-click, what is coming from the organic, it's not really something that you would be able to figure out on Kentico side. I believe that when you're setting up your pay-per-click campaigns, you may also include some additional IDs, right, or whatever you would call that, in those URLs. So I would say that the only way I can think of would be to, add some additional content to that URL, and that way you will be able to identify a pay-per-click request compared to organic one, which will be just an query string with the keywords, right? But the one thing that we've been doing with some other clients, and maybe that's what you are actually asking. So what they've been doing is they would do for their pay-per-click campaigns, they would actually use a various alias paths, right? So you have a default URL, and then you can create a many alias paths, as you know. So they've been differentiating between those because for the pay-per-click campaign, the alias path that they were using for those campaigns would be excluded from us. It wouldn't be in the sitemap. It would be excluded from robots text file. So they've been basically preventing search engine to index that page under the domain alias that they were using for the campaigns only, and then that way they differentiate that they knew that if something is coming from the domain alias that is associated with specific campaign, it has to be pay-per-click. If it's some other URL that is pointing to the same page, it has to be organic. It's not 100% accurate because I can easily imagine that someone will link to that campaign somewhere, right? And that's pretty much the same thing as having it on my side. So I don't know how that worked for them. I know that they were trying to use that approach. The second question that you had about the setting a goal in IMS, let's say an URL goal. Guillermo, can you tell me what you mean by that? What do you mean by URL goal? Mean like to getting a certain number of hits or page views for the specific, I mean a landing page. I'm sorry, but it still doesn't ring a bell. So if the landing pages are obviously tracked already, right? The landing pages are tracked out of box. So the system will keep a track of how many times certain page was used as a landing page. That's already something that is in place. Is that what you're trying to do, or is it something more complex? Are you still trying to explain that? I don't see anything coming through. Yeah, maybe if you want to talk about that a little more, feel free to send me an email. Key phrases. I would like to see which are the specific key phrases. Oh, I see. Well, in that case, that's pretty much something that you would have to figure out. You would have to log yourself using that custom API. So there's something like I did based on the keywords, key phrases that are referring to that landing page. I believe that's what I did, right? I'm tracking the landing page, what page is used as a landing page, and what are the key phrases that converted to that landing page. But yeah, either way, feel free to send me an email. My email is karolj@kentico.com, and for all of you, it's in the chat box. Feel free to send me an email if you want to discuss that a little more. I'm happy to look at that with you, and we can figure it out together, because I believe that if it's something that you guys are using a lot, I can see that the other clients could benefit of it as well. So yeah, just let me know and can take a look on that. Any other questions? Anyone else? Absolutely, you're welcome. Okay, so if there are no other questions, well, thank you for your time today. It was certainly pleasure to talk to you again. I only get this chance every so often, so it seems like you guys are interested in web analytics a lot. I know that there are definitely areas to improve. So as with any other module, the Kentico would very much appreciate any kind of feedback that you can provide. If there are specific statistics that you would like to see in web analytics, please let us know. Whether you send that to support@kentico.com or you submit that through the Kentico user voice. Either way, we would very, very much appreciate that. And as for me, well, I'm looking forward to see you again some next time. And you guys have a great rest of the evening, or have a great day if you are somewhere around here in the US. I will talk to you later. Thank you. Bye.